My sister kicked me out after our parents died, and I was left on the streets. Now she's divorced, penniless, and begging for my help. But can I ever forget her betrayal? For a bit of context, I'm 28M, and I have a complicated relationship with my older sister, Hannah, 34F. Growing up, we weren't super close. Hannah was always the golden child in the family, straight as, valedictorian, got into a prestigious college, the whole package. I was the problem kid. I struggled in school, got into trouble a lot. And when my parents passed away when I was 16, Hannah ended up getting legal custody of me. It was a rough time. I was grieving, confused, and angry. Hannah was only 22, fresh out of college, and honestly, we both did our best, but she was in way over her head. A few years in, when I was 18, we had a major falling out. She accused me of being ungrateful and lazy. I accused her of being controlling and suffocating. It got so bad that she kicked me out. I had nowhere to go, but she said it was time for me to grow up and figure things out on my own. I ended up couch surfing at friends' places and eventually got a job at a grocery store where I slowly pulled myself together. Over the years, I managed to go back to school, get a degree, and now I have a stable job in tech. I'm not rich by any means, but I have a small apartment, and for the first time in my life, I feel like I have my feet under me. Hannah and I have had minimal contact since she kicked me out. She never apologized, and I never reached out. I think we both silently agreed to just stay out of each other's lives. But last month, things took a turn. I got a call out of the blue from Hannah. It was awkward right from the start. I almost didn't answer, but some part of me thought maybe it was an emergency, and it sort of was, just not the kind I expected. Hannah said she was getting a divorce. Her husband of 7 years, Mark, had been cheating on her. Not just a one-time thing, but a full-blown affair with one of her closest friends. To make matters worse, the house they lived in was technically in Mark's name, and he's forcing her to sell it and split the proceeds. She was devastated, sounded on the brink of a breakdown, and needed a place to stay for a few months while she figured things out. I didn't know how to react. On one hand, she's my sister, and she's clearly hurting. On the other hand, I can't forget what she put me through. I told her I needed some time to think about it. Since that call, she's been messaging me almost daily, asking if I've made a decision. Part of me feels like I should help her. I mean, she did take me in when I had no one else, even if it ended badly. But another part of me feels like this is karma coming back around. I don't know if I'm being petty or protecting myself. After a few days of back and forth over text, Hannah showed up at my place. I was shocked. I hadn't even told her where I lived, so she must have done some digging. She was holding a suitcase and looked like she hadn't slept in days. I couldn't just leave her standing outside, so I let her in. We sat down, and she immediately started sobbing. "I have nowhere else to go," she said. "I'm sorry for what I did to you. I know I messed up, but I'm really, really sorry. Please, just give me a chance to make things right." It was surreal. I'd fantasized about her apologizing to me a million times, but now that it was happening, it felt empty. Maybe because it came at a time when she needed something from me. I told her I appreciated her apology, but that I needed to protect my own mental health. I said I wasn't sure I could ever stay here, at least not without talking it through more. That's when things took a turn. She went from tearful and apologetic to angry and defensive. "I took you in when I was 22, Nick," she yelled. "I gave up my early 20s to take care of you. And now you can't even do this for me." I felt a surge of anger rise up in me. "You didn't take care of me, Hannah. You controlled me. And then you abandoned me when I needed you most." I snapped back. "You can't just waltz in here and expect everything to be fine because you're in trouble now." We ended up shouting at each other until I finally told her to leave. She stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Now I feel awful. I keep thinking about her standing on my doorstep with that suitcase, looking completely lost. But I also feel like I have a right to protect myself from the chaos that having her here would bring. Part 4. Emotional Aftermath and Guilt. Since she left, I've been plagued with guilt. I don't know where she's staying, maybe a friend's, or maybe she scraped together enough for a hotel. She's stopped messaging me, which somehow makes me feel even worse. The silence is heavy. I keep replaying the argument in my head, wondering if I was too harsh, if I should have at least let her stay a night or two. But then I think about the months after she kicked me out. I remember the nights I spent on friends' floors, feeling worthless and unwanted. She was the last family I had, and she turned her back on me. Maybe I'm just scared that letting her in will reopen old wounds I thought were healed. I called a couple of mutual friends to ask if they've heard from her, but no one has. I'm torn between reaching out and apologizing or standing my ground and hoping she finds another solution. I just don't know what's right. Since she left, I've been plagued with guilt. I don't know where she's staying, maybe a friend's, or maybe she scraped together enough for a hotel. She stopped messaging me, which somehow makes me feel even worse. The silence is heavy. I keep replaying the argument in my head, wondering if I was too harsh, if I should have at least let her stay a night or two. But then I think about the months after she kicked me out. I remember the nights I spent on friends' floors, feeling worthless and unwanted. She was the last family I had, and she turned her back on me. Maybe I'm just scared that letting her in will reopen old wounds I thought were healed. I called a couple of mutual friends to ask if they've heard from her, but no one has. I'm torn between reaching out and apologizing or standing my ground and hoping she finds another solution. I just don't know what's right. It's been almost 2 weeks since Hannah showed up at my door. The silence has been weird. There's this void where all my anger and resentment used to be, and now it's just confusion. I've tried focusing on work, hanging out with friends, and even started exercising more, but there's this nagging feeling that I should have handled things differently. I keep checking my phone, expecting a message or missed call, but there's nothing. A few days ago, I decided to text her just to see if she's okay. I said, "Hope you're all right. Let me know if you need anything." Simple, but it took me hours to write and even longer to hit send. She didn't reply. Then yesterday, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something told me to pick up. It was a woman named Carol. She introduced herself as a friend of Hannah's from her old neighborhood, and she was clearly hesitant to talk. I'm really sorry to bother you, but I thought you should know Hannah's staying with me for now. She's not doing too well." I felt a jolt of anxiety. "What do you mean?" Carol took a deep breath and explained that after our confrontation, Hannah ended up staying with a few friends, but couldn't find a stable place. She'd been crashing on couches and, in her words, spiraling. Apparently, Mark's actions and our argument pushed her to a breaking point. Carol mentioned that Hannah has been drinking heavily and isolating herself. She didn't tell me this to guilt-trip me, she said, but because she was worried. She didn't know how to help. After the call, I sat in my kitchen for a long time, staring at the wall. It's not like Hannah to fall apart like this. She's always been the strong, determined one, the one who had it all together. A big part of me wanted to say, "Not my problem," and move on with my life. But another part, the part that remembers her standing at the doorway with her suitcase, couldn't shake the feeling that I played a role in pushing her over the edge. I decided to reach out again. This time, I called. No answer. So I left a voicemail. "Hey, it's me. I heard you're staying with Carol. Just wanted to say I'm sorry for everything. I don't know if you want to talk, but I'm here if you do." A few hours later, I got a text from her. It was short and didn't really address my message, but she said she was doing fine and didn't want me to worry. That's Hannah in a nutshell. Putting up walls even when she's crumbling. I called Carol back and asked if there was anything specific Hannah needed. She hesitated, then mentioned that Hannah had been struggling financially. Her lawyer's fees were piling up, and she's been dipping into savings that were supposed to be for a fresh start once the divorce finalized. Carol said she didn't want to overstep, but if I wanted to help, maybe I could support her in some way, even if it was just with groceries or essentials. I don't have a lot of extra cash myself, but I felt like I couldn't just sit on my hands. So I transferred a small amount to Carol's account and asked her to use it for Hannah's expenses. I didn't want Hannah to know it came from me, knowing her. She'd refuse it out of pride. Carol thanked me and said she'd keep it between us. I thought I'd feel better after helping, but if anything, it made things more complicated. What am I even doing? Am I trying to buy off my guilt? Am I just making things worse? Later that night, I got a text from Hannah again. This time, it was longer. Nick, Carol told me what you did. I don't want your money. I want us to be okay. I don't know how we got to this place where we're basically strangers. I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But when I took you in, I really did try. I thought I was doing what was best for you. I was so overwhelmed and scared back then. I didn't know how to be your sister and your guardian at the same time. So I ended up failing at both. Reading that, I felt a lump in my throat. All these years, I'd built up this image of her as this unfeeling, heartless person who threw me out like trash. I never considered that maybe she was hurting too. That maybe she was also lost and scared, just like I was. But I still remember the feeling of being kicked out. The betrayal. The loneliness. Can I really just let that go? I stared at her message for what felt like hours before finally replying, I don't hate you, Hannah. But you really hurt me. I needed you, and you turned your back on me. I know you were young and didn't have it figured out, but that doesn't make it hurt any less. I don't know how to move past that. Her response came almost instantly, I know. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm just asking for a chance to try again, as family. So now I'm at a crossroads. Part of me wants to try and rebuild something with her. Whatever's left of our relationship. Maybe we can be siblings again. But part of me is terrified that letting her back in will just lead to more pain. This morning, I reached out to Carol and asked if she could meet up for coffee. I need to understand what's really going on with Hannah, beyond the bits and pieces I'm getting. I don't know what I'm hoping to find out, but I need to be sure before I make a decision that could either help us heal or break us both for good. I met Carol at a small cafe downtown. I recognized her immediately from a picture Hannah had shown me years ago when she first introduced us. Back then, I was still in high school and she and Hannah used to hang out a lot. She hasn't changed much. Same short bob, kind eyes, and slightly nervous demeanor. When she spotted me, she gave a tentative smile and waved. Hey, Nick, she said as I approached the table. Thanks for meeting me. Of course, I replied, sitting down. Thanks for looking out for Hannah. I know things have been complicated. She nodded slowly, stirring her coffee. Yeah, complicated is a good word for it. I wasn't sure what else to do. She's in such a bad place, and I think a lot of it has to do with what happened between you two. She's been holding onto so much guilt. I sighed, looking down at the table. I get that, but guilt doesn't erase what she did. She shut me out when I needed her the most. And now I'm supposed to just open my door and pretend like nothing happened? No. Carol said softly, not pretend. But maybe see it as a chance to talk through things. She's changed, Nick, and I think you have too. Maybe you can meet somewhere in the middle. I sat back, mulling over her words. Carol started telling me more about Hannah's situation. Apparently, the divorce had hit her harder than anyone realized. Mark was not only cheating on her, but was also gaslighting her, making her feel like it was her fault for being too focused on her career and not enough on him. He even tried to convince her that she wasn't capable of managing her finances without him, something she started to believe. The Hannah I knew would never fall for that. But then again, people change, especially when they're broken down piece by piece. She really has no one else, Carol continued, her voice low. Most of her friends sided with Mark, and her social circle has pretty much evaporated. It's like everything she built her life around has crumbled. That's why she reached out to you. I rubbed my forehead, feeling the weight of everything settle on my shoulders. But why now? Why come to me after all these years? Because you're the only family she has left, Carol said simply. She knows she can't undo the past, but she wants to at least try to be there for you now, in whatever way you'll let her. That's why I think if you two could just sit down and have a real conversation, it might help, even if it doesn't lead to forgiveness. After meeting Carol, I spent a few days mulling things over. It felt like I was on this emotional roller coaster. One moment I'd be resolute about keeping my distance, and the next I'd feel like the worst person in the world for not helping Hannah out more. Then one night I was sitting at home, staring blankly at the TV, when there was a knock on my door. My stomach tightened. I had a feeling who it might be. When I opened the door, Hannah was standing there. She looked exhausted, like she'd been running on fumes for days. But her eyes were clear, and there was something different about her. An openness I hadn't seen in a long time. "Hey," she said quietly. "Hey." I stood there, unsure what to do. "You want to come in?" She nodded, and I stepped aside. We sat in the living room, the silence stretching out awkwardly between us. I was waiting for her to say something, but instead, she just looked around, taking in the place. It wasn't much. A small one-bedroom apartment with a tiny kitchen and mismatched furniture I'd picked up over the years. But it was mine, and for some reason I felt a pang of embarrassment, like I was being judged. "I like it," she finally said. "It's cozy." "Thanks," I replied, still unsure where this was going. "What brings you here?" She took a deep breath. I don't know how to say this without it sounding rehearsed, but I really am sorry, Nick, for everything. I know I've said it before, but I need you to hear it. I shifted uncomfortably. "I heard you. It's just, I don't know if I can forget what happened." "I don't expect you to," she said, her voice steady. "But I need to explain myself. I know I was terrible back then, and I don't want to make excuses, but I was so young. I'd just graduated and had no idea what I was doing. And then suddenly, I was responsible for you. I was grieving too, and I was scared all the time. Scared of losing you. Scared of messing up. And I ended up doing exactly that." She looked away, blinking back tears. "I thought kicking you out was the tough love you needed. I convinced myself that I was helping you, pushing you to stand on your own. But I see now that it wasn't love. It was me running away because I didn't know how to deal with my own feelings. I didn't say anything. I just listened. For the first time, I could hear the fear and regret in her voice. She wasn't just saying sorry. She was bearing a part of herself I had never seen before. "I know it's not fair to come to you now, when I'm at my lowest," she continued. "I know it looks like I'm just using you. But I swear, Nick, I want to be in your life again. Not because I need something from you, but because I miss you. And I don't want to lose the only family I have left." I leaned back, taking a deep breath. "Hannah, I'm not going to lie. You being here, asking for another chance, it's stirring up a lot of stuff I thought I'd buried. I want to believe you, but I'm scared. Letting you in means risking getting hurt again. And I'm not sure I can handle that." She nodded slowly, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I understand. And I'm not asking you to let me move in or anything like that. I want to start small. Maybe we can talk more, get coffee, see each other occasionally, and rebuild from there." It sounded reasonable, safe even. It was more than I thought I could offer, but less than she probably hoped for. "Okay," I said finally. "We can try that, but no promises. If it gets too much, I might have to step back." "I wouldn't expect anything else," she said with a small smile. "Thank you, Nick. You don't know how much this means to me." After she left, I sat in the empty apartment, the silence buzzing around me. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if this will lead to healing or just more pain. But maybe it's time to stop living in the shadow of the past and start figuring out if we can have some sort of future, whatever that might look like. The next few weeks were awkward, to say the least. We started meeting up on Sundays for coffee, just an hour or so at a local cafe, neutral ground where it was easier to keep the conversation light and focused. The first couple of times, we stuck to safe topics like work and mutual acquaintances. Neither of us dared to bring up the past, and honestly, I was fine with that. I figured it was better to get comfortable just being around each other before diving into anything heavy. One Sunday morning, about a month after that night when Hannah showed up at my door, she finally brought up something more personal. "So, I saw Mark the other day," she said, swirling her coffee absent-mindedly. Her voice was calm, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. I raised an eyebrow. "Where?" "He showed up at Carol's," she said quietly. "He wanted to talk about the divorce. Or at least, that's what he said. But it was more about him trying to guilt-trip me into taking a lower settlement. He's acting like I'm the one who ruined our marriage." It was hard to hear. I felt a rush of anger on her behalf, something I hadn't expected to feel. I didn't know Mark well, but the few times I'd met him at family events or holidays, he'd always struck me as the charming, smooth-talking type, the kind of guy who could twist things around and make you doubt your own memories. "What did you say?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. "I told him to leave and that he could talk to my lawyer," she replied, smiling weakly. It was the first time I felt like I was standing up for myself in I don't know how long. "Good for you," I said, surprised at how much I meant it. "Seriously, Hannah, that's huge." She looked down at her coffee cup, fingers tracing the rim. It felt good. But then afterwards, I felt so empty. I had this urge to call him, to apologize for. She stopped, shaking her head. "I don't even know what for. It's like I'm still trapped in his world, even when I'm not." "Yeah, that's how people like him operate," I said softly. "They mess with your head so much that even when you're out, you're still fighting against the hold they had on you." She glanced up at me, eyes wide. "You sound like you know a lot about this." I shrugged. "I've seen it before. Some friends have been through similar stuff. It's not easy to get out. And it's definitely not easy to move on." We lapsed into silence, and I realized that was the most honest conversation we'd had since reconnecting. Maybe even since before she kicked me out. I could see how much she was struggling, but she was trying. That counted for something, right? About 2 weeks later, Hannah called me out of the blue, something she rarely did. I almost didn't pick up, but curiosity got the better of me. "Hey, what's up?" I said, a little wary. "Hey, I know this is last minute, but I'm making dinner at Carol's tonight. It's nothing fancy, just pasta and salad. Would you want to come over? I thought maybe we could hang out somewhere that's not a coffee shop. For once." I hesitated. It felt like a big step, more personal somehow, like shifting from polite small talk to something deeper. But she sounded hopeful, and I couldn't bring myself to say no. "Yeah, sure," I said finally. "What time?" "7-ish," she asked, sounding almost surprised that I'd agreed so quickly. "Great. I'll text you the address." The rest of the day, I felt weirdly anxious. It was just dinner, right? But I couldn't help feeling like this was a test of some sort, maybe for both of us. When I showed up at Carol's place, I was greeted by the smell of garlic and herbs. Carol answered the door with a warm smile and ushered me inside. Her apartment was cozy, with mismatched furniture and a ton of plants everywhere. It reminded me of my old place when I first started getting on my feet. Hannah was in the kitchen, stirring a pot of pasta. She looked different, more at ease, like she was in her element. When she saw me, she wiped her hands on a towel and gave me a tentative smile. "Hey, you made it," she said, sounding almost surprised. "Yeah, I did," I replied, smiling back. "What can I help with?" "Nothing, just relax." "It's almost ready," she said, her voice light. "Carol's been keeping me company while I figure out how not to burn the sauce." Carol laughed from behind me. She's actually a pretty good cook, but she gets in her head about it. Dinner was nice. We ate, we talked, and for a while it felt like we were just two siblings catching up. There were a few tense moments when the conversation dipped into territory, like childhood memories or references to our parents, but for the most part it was just normal, comfortable even. After dinner we moved to the living room, sipping tea and chatting about random things. Carol excused herself after a while, giving us a little space. Hannah seemed to take a deep breath, like she was preparing herself for something. "I've been meaning to ask you something," she said, her voice hesitant. "About that day, when I kicked you out, I froze, my hand gripping my cup a little too tightly." "Yeah. What do you remember most about it?" she asked, looking at me intently. The question caught me off guard. I hadn't expected her to go there, and I could feel myself getting defensive, but something in her expression made me pause. "I remember feeling like I was completely alone," I said slowly. "Like I didn't matter to you. Like I was just a burden you couldn't wait to get rid of." Hannah winced, tears filling her eyes. "I'm so sorry, Nick. That's exactly what I never wanted you to feel. But I see now that's exactly what I did. I was overwhelmed. I felt like I was drowning, and I thought pushing you away would give me some control. But it was selfish and cruel. I see that now." I swallowed hard, struggling to keep my emotions in check. "It took me a long time to come to terms with it, Hannah. I get that you were young and scared, but I was too, and you were all I had." She reached across the table and put her hand over mine. "I know I can't take back what happened. I know I don't deserve a second chance. But I want you to know I'm going to keep showing up no matter what. I want to be someone you can count on, even if it's just in small ways." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the sincerity in her eyes. It didn't erase the pain or fix everything, but maybe, just maybe, it was a start. "Okay," I said quietly. "Let's just keep taking it one step at a time." She smiled through her tears. "Yeah, one step at a time." The following weeks were a slow, careful dance. Hannah and I continued meeting up, sometimes at Carol's, other times at different restaurants and parks around the city. We tried to focus on the present, talking about everything from favorite TV shows to what we were looking forward to in the coming months. Each conversation felt like laying a new brick in something that might someday resemble a bridge between us. We weren't quite there yet, but we were making progress. One Saturday afternoon, I decided it was time to face the past head-on. I texted Hannah and asked if she wanted to take a drive with me. I didn't say where we were going, and she didn't ask. She just agreed to come along. We drove in silence for most of the way. I could see her sneaking curious glances at me, but I didn't say anything until we pulled up to the old neighborhood, our parents' house, the one she had to sell after they died, the house where we'd spent most of our childhood. It felt surreal being back. The current owners had made some changes. The paint was different, and the old oak tree in the front yard had been cut down. But the bones of it were the same. "Why did you bring me here?" Hannah asked softly, her voice filled with a mix of apprehension and nostalgia. "Because I think we need to face this place," I replied. "I know we both carry a lot of pain from what happened here, and I think it's been holding us back. We lost Mom and Dad here. We lost us here, too." She looked at me, her eyes misty but determined. "Yeah, we did." We got out of the car and stood in front of the house, not speaking for a long time. Memories flooded back, the good and the bad. I remembered playing catch with Dad in the yard, the smell of Mom's cookies wafting through the windows, the fights Hannah and I had as teenagers, the silent dinners after our parents passed, when we were both lost in our own grief. "I blamed you for a long time," I admitted, staring at the house. "I thought that if you hadn't kicked me out, we could have stayed a family somehow. But I see now that it wasn't your fault. We were both broken, and we just didn't know how to hold on to each other. She let out a shaky breath. I blamed myself too, Nick. Every single day. I convinced myself I was doing the right thing, but deep down I knew I was pushing you away because I didn't know how to deal with my own pain. I was angry at you for being a reminder of everything I'd lost. Her words hit me hard, but there was a strange relief in hearing them. It took me years to understand why you did it, I said quietly, and now I'm not sure if I'm still holding on to the anger because I'm afraid of letting go of it. It's been such a part of me. She turned to face me, tears streaming down her cheeks. I don't want you to let it go for me. I don't deserve that. But if holding on to it is hurting you, then maybe it's time to try. I nodded, taking a deep breath. Maybe it is. We stood there for a while longer, just taking in the house and everything it represented. It felt like we were finally letting some of the ghosts out, giving them permission to leave. I don't know what the future looks like for us, I said eventually, breaking the silence. But I want us to try, to build something new. I don't want to keep holding on to what could have been. Me too, Hannah whispered. Whatever it takes, I'm willing to put in the work. After a while, we got back in the car. The drive home felt lighter, the air between us less tense. When I dropped her off at Carol's, she turned to me with a small, genuine smile. Thank you, Nick, for everything today, for giving me a chance. I smiled back. Thank you for taking it. A few months have passed since that day. Hannah and I have continued to see each other regularly. It's not perfect. We still have our moments of awkwardness and discomfort. But we've started sharing more of our lives with each other. She's even started seeing a therapist to work through her feelings about the divorce and our parents' death. I'm proud of her for that. I've realized that forgiving her doesn't mean forgetting what happened or pretending it didn't hurt. It means accepting that we were both hurt and flawed and human. It means choosing to move forward instead of staying trapped in the past. Hannah recently moved into a small apartment of her own, just a few blocks away from mine. It's nothing fancy, but it's hers. She's building a new life for herself, one step at a time. We've even had a few dinners at each other's places, something I never thought would happen again. The other night, after I helped her put together some IKEA furniture, which ended up taking way longer than it should have, we sat down with a couple of beers, laughing about how terrible we both are at following instructions. There was this moment when she looked at me, and I saw something in her eyes that I hadn't seen in a long time. Peace. And for the first time, I felt it too. So, where does that leave us? We're not the siblings we could have been, and maybe we never will be. But we're not strangers anymore either. We're something in between family trying to figure it out, and that's enough for now. I don't know what the future holds, but I'm hopeful, and that's a good place to start. Thank you, Reddit, for listening and for the support and advice along the way. This might be the end of this chapter, but it's not the end of the story. It's just the beginning of something new. Wish us luck. We're going to need it.